The courtroom was silent. The only sound was the shuffle of papers as Judge Carla Whitman, the first black female judge in Lincoln County, reviewed the case before her. Everyone's eyes were on the stern-faced woman seated at the bench, her black robe a symbol of justice. The quiet was broken by a sharp voice cutting through the air like a whip. "Are you kidding me? You can't seriously expect me to take orders from her." Deputy Melissa Conway, a seasoned cop with nearly 2 decades on the force, stood in the center of the room. Her words sent a wave of murmurs rippling through the courtroom. Her face was flushed with anger, and her hand rested arrogantly on her hip. Everyone in the room froze, stunned at her audacity. Judge Whitman calmly set her papers down and lifted her gaze. "Excuse me, Officer Conway? Do you want to repeat that?" Conway smirked, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm saying it loud and clear. I don't take orders from people like you. Maybe in your world, you think you're in charge, but I know how this really works." The room fell into a shocked silence. Gasps could be heard from the jury and spectators alike. Even the court stenographer, who usually remained expressionless, looked up with wide eyes. Judge Whitman leaned forward, her calm voice cutting like a knife. "You're walking on dangerous ground, Deputy. Choose your next words very carefully." Melissa folded her arms, her smirk widening. "I'm not afraid of you, Judge. You might have fooled some people into thinking you belong here, but not me." Before anyone could react, Judge Whitman's gavel struck the bench with a loud crack. "Officer Conway, you are hereby in contempt of court. Bailiff, take her into custody immediately." What happened next left everyone in shock. Conway didn't move. Instead, she laughed, a loud mocking sound that echoed through the chamber. She pointed a finger directly at the judge. "You think you can put me in cuffs?" she sneered. "Go ahead and try. I'd love to see that headline. Black judge tries to arrest decorated white officer in her own courtroom." The bailiff hesitated, looking between the judge and the defiant officer. Conway took a step forward, her hand resting near her belt where her gun and badge hung. The tension in the room was suffocating. Judge Whitman didn't flinch. "This is your final warning, Officer Conway." But before the bailiff could act, the courtroom doors burst open. 2 days earlier, Judge Carla Whitman had been preparing for what she thought would be a standard week in court. She was used to handling difficult cases, but something about the upcoming docket gave her a feeling of unease. One of the cases involved a young black man named Eric Daniels, who had filed a complaint of police brutality against Deputy Melissa Conway. Eric claimed that during a traffic stop, Conway had not only used excessive force but hurled racial slurs at him. The case had gained media attention, drawing protests outside the courthouse. Carla knew the stakes were high. That Monday morning, as she walked into her chambers, her assistant, Claire, greeted her with a worried look. "Judge Whitman, I think you should see this." Claire handed her a tablet with a news article showing Conway standing in front of a crowd of supporters. "I will not be intimidated by false accusations or political agendas," Conway was quoted as saying. "I've served this county with honor, and I won't let anyone, no matter who they are, tear down my reputation." Carla set the tablet down and sighed. "This isn't going to be easy," she said to Claire. By the time court was in session, the tension was palpable. Protesters outside shouted for justice, while Conway's supporters held signs proclaiming her innocence. Inside, Carla maintained her composure as the proceedings began. Eric Daniels took the stand, his voice trembling as he recounted the events of the traffic stop. "She pulled me over for no reason," he said. "When I asked why, she yelled at me to get out of the car. When I hesitated, she dragged me out and slammed me against the hood. I wasn't resisting, but she kept twisting my arm and calling me." He stopped, his voice breaking. Judge Whitman leaned forward, her tone gentle. "Take your time, Mr. Daniels." Eric nodded, taking a deep breath. "She kept calling me a thug. Told me I didn't belong in this neighborhood. I wasn't even speeding. She just saw me and decided I was guilty of something." Conway's attorney was quick to object, claiming Eric's account was exaggerated and unprovable. But the courtroom grew quiet when a witness, a local schoolteacher, testified that she had seen the incident from her porch and recorded part of it on her phone. The video was damning. It showed Conway shouting at Eric, calling him names, and using force that seemed unnecessary. When Conway took the stand to defend herself, her demeanor was cold. She claimed Eric had been aggressive and that she feared for her safety. "I did what I had to do," she said, her chin held high. He fit the description of someone we were looking for. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Carla stayed calm, asking questions that poked holes in Conway's story. Deputy Conway, can you explain why you didn't call for backup if you felt so threatened? Conway hesitated. I didn't think I needed to. Yet you claim Mr. Daniels was a threat. How do you reconcile those two statements? The tension in the room mounted, and Conway's frustration was evident. By the end of the day, it was clear her credibility was crumbling. But it was during a break that things took a more personal turn. Conway approached Carla in the hallway, away from the eyes of the jury and spectators. You're really something, Conway said, her voice low but venomous. Carla looked at her evenly. Is there something I can help you with, Deputy? You think you're untouchable, don't you? Conway sneered. Because you're up there in that robe, acting like you're better than the rest of us. But I know the truth. Carla didn't rise to the bait. If you're done, I suggest you return to your attorney. Conway leaned in, her voice a whisper. You're going to regret this. The words stayed with Carla as she returned to the courtroom. And now, just 2 days later, that threat was unfolding in the most public and shocking way. The courtroom doors slammed open, and all eyes turned to the figure standing in the doorway. Deputy Chief Robert Hansen, a tall man with a commanding presence, strode into the room. His piercing blue eyes scanned the courtroom, settling on Melissa Conway, who was still defiantly standing in front of Judge Whitman. Officer Conway, he said in a deep, firm voice, step away from the bench and come with me. Now. Conway turned to face her superior, her smirk fading slightly but not disappearing entirely. Chief Hansen, I'm handling this situation. There's no need for you to step in. Hansen didn't budge. This isn't a discussion. Your behavior is out of line, and you're embarrassing the department. Stand down. The courtroom was silent except for the scribbling of the court stenographer, who hadn't stopped documenting the surreal turn of events. Judge Whitman remained composed, her hands folded neatly on the bench, but her sharp eyes stayed locked on Conway. I'm not going anywhere, Conway said, crossing her arms. This judge is trying to railroad me, and I won't let her destroy my career. Someone has to stand up to this madness. Chief Hansen's jaw tightened. Melissa, don't make this worse than it already is. Conway's voice rose, cracking with anger. Worse? You want to talk about worse? This is a witch hunt, and you're just going to stand there and let it happen? I've given 20 years to this badge. Hansen took a step closer. His voice dropped to a dangerous calm. And you're about to throw it all away if you don't walk out with me right now. Judge Whitman, seeing the standoff escalate, finally spoke. Deputy Chief Hansen, I appreciate your intervention, but this court is not a platform for internal police matters. Officer Conway is in contempt of court, and as such, she will be held accountable. Conway snapped her head back toward the judge. Accountable? You wouldn't know the meaning of the word if it hit you in the face. You don't belong here, you never did. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Chief Hansen's face hardened, and he grabbed Conway's arm. That's enough, Melissa. She jerked her arm free. Don't touch me. The bailiff, emboldened by Hansen's presence, moved closer, his hand on his taser. Deputy Conway, comply or I will have no choice but to restrain you. For a moment, it looked like she might escalate further, her hand twitching near her belt. The entire courtroom collectively held its breath. Then Conway stepped back, her face a mask of fury. Fine, she spat. But this isn't over. Chief Hansen gave a curt nod to the bailiff, who took Conway by the arm and began escorting her out. The courtroom doors closed behind them, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Judge Whitman took a deep breath, her face unreadable. Let's take a recess, she announced, her voice steady. Court will reconvene in 30 minutes. As the spectators filed out, the murmurs grew louder. Reporters outside the courthouse would soon catch wind of what had happened, and Carla knew the day wasn't over, not by a long shot. During the recess, Carla sat alone in her chambers, staring at her reflection in the small mirror on her desk. She'd been through difficult moments before. Being the first black judge in Lincoln County came with its challenges, but this felt different. Personal. Dangerous. Her assistant, Claire, knocked softly and entered, looking worried. Judge Whitman, are you okay? Carla nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. I'm fine, Claire. What's the situation outside? Claire hesitated. It's chaos. Protesters are chanting louder than ever, and Conway's supporters are demanding that she be released. The media's all over it. Carla sighed. This isn't just about the trial anymore. It's about everything I represent. They see me as a threat. You're not alone, Claire said firmly. People are standing with you too. Don't forget that. Before Carla could respond, there was another knock at the door. It was Chief Hansen. He entered without waiting for an invitation, his expression unreadable. Judge Whitman, he began, I want to apologize for what happened in the courtroom. Deputy Conway's behavior was unacceptable, and I take full responsibility for letting it get this far. Carla regarded him carefully. Your apology is noted, but this isn't just about your officer. This is about the integrity of this court. I understand, Hansen said, and I'll make sure she faces consequences. But I need you to know that she's not acting alone. There are people in the department who... He paused, as if weighing his words. Who what? Carla pressed. Hansen exhaled. Who don't think you should be sitting on that bench? Conway just happens to be the loudest voice among them. The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Carla's jaw tightened. I appreciate your honesty, Chief, but this court isn't about what they think. It's about justice. And I won't let anyone, inside or outside the system, intimidate me. Hansen nodded, respect flickering in his eyes. I figured you'd say that. Just be careful. Some of them don't play by the rules. As court resumed, the atmosphere was even more charged. Eric Daniels took the stand again, and Carla did her best to focus on the case at hand. But her mind kept drifting to Hansen's warning. The day ended with closing arguments, and the jury was dismissed to deliberate. As Carla prepared to leave the courthouse, her security detail informed her of the situation outside. It's bad, Judge, one of the guards said. You might want to use the back exit. But Carla shook her head. No. I'm not sneaking out of my own courthouse. With her head held high, she walked through the main doors, where protesters and reporters swarmed like bees. Questions were shouted, accusations hurled, and signs waved in her face. Conway's supporters booed loudly, but Carla kept walking. Then, out of nowhere, a glass bottle came flying through the air. It missed Carla's head by inches, shattering against the steps behind her. The crowd erupted in chaos. Carla's security detail sprang into action, shielding her and rushing her to a waiting car. But as the vehicle sped away, Carla's mind was racing. This wasn't just resistance to her presence on the bench. This was an outright attack. And it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The shattered glass on the courthouse steps was more than just a bottle, it was a warning. As Judge Carla Whitman sat in the back of the security car, her hands trembled slightly, but her face betrayed no emotion. She had learned long ago how to keep her composure under pressure. The car sped through the streets of Lincoln County, her security detail on high alert. Carla's phone buzzed in her bag. She pulled it out and saw a flood of notifications, emails, messages, and news alerts. One headline caught her attention. Tensions escalate. Black judge faces threats after confrontation with white officer in courtroom. Carla sighed deeply. The media storm was growing, and she knew this was just the beginning. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from her husband, Marcus. Hey, she said softly, her voice steadier than she felt. Carla, are you okay? Marcus's voice was tense. I just saw what happened on the news. They said someone threw a bottle at you. I'm fine, she reassured him. It didn't hit me. That's not the point, Marcus said, frustration creeping into his voice. This isn't just about the case anymore. They're coming after you. Carla closed her eyes for a moment, leaning her head against the window. I know. But I can't back down, Marcus. If I do, they win. You're the bravest person I know, Marcus said, his voice softening. But I'm scared for you. For us. I'll be home soon, Carla said. We'll talk then. The car pulled into her driveway, and the guards escorted Carla to the door. Marcus was waiting inside, his arms crossed. He was a tall man with a quiet strength, his love and concern for Carla etched on his face. As soon as she stepped inside, he pulled her into a hug. You shouldn't have to go through this. Carla allowed herself a brief moment of vulnerability, leaning into him before pulling away. I knew what I was signing up for when I took this job. Change doesn't come without resistance. Marcus frowned but didn't argue. Instead, he led her to the kitchen, where their teenage daughter, Layla, was sitting at the table with her headphones on. When Layla saw her mom, she quickly pulled them off. "Mom, are you okay? I saw everything online." Carla smiled faintly. "I'm fine, sweetheart. You don't need to worry." "But I do worry," Layla said, her voice cracking. "What if they hurt you? What if—" "Hey," Carla interrupted gently, taking her daughter's hand. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." The family sat together for a while, the tension in the room palpable. But Carla knew she couldn't let fear take over. She had a job to do, and she wasn't going to let anyone scare her away from it. The next morning, Carla arrived at the courthouse to find a heavier police presence than usual. Officers were stationed at every entrance, their eyes scanning the crowd of protesters that had already gathered. As she walked through the halls, she felt the weight of every stare. Some were supportive, offering her nods of encouragement. Others were hostile, their eyes filled with resentment. But Carla held her head high, her steps measured and confident. Her first order of business was a meeting with Chief Hansen. He had requested to see her before court resumed. When she entered his office, he was already seated, his expression grim. "Judge Whitman," he greeted her, standing briefly before sitting again. "Thank you for coming. What's this about, Chief?" Carla asked, sitting across from him. "I've been reviewing the situation with Deputy Conway," Hansen said. "After her outburst in court and the incident outside the courthouse yesterday, I've decided to suspend her pending an internal investigation." Carla raised an eyebrow. "I appreciate your action, but I doubt that will do much to calm the situation." Hansen sighed. "You're right. There's a lot of tension in the department right now. Some officers feel like Conway is being made a scapegoat. Others think her behavior was unacceptable and reflects poorly on all of us. It's tearing us apart." "And what about you, Chief?" Carla asked. "Where do you stand?" Hansen hesitated, then met her gaze. "I stand with justice. And I'll admit, it's not easy in a department where old biases run deep. But I'm trying to change that." Carla studied him for a moment. She sensed he was being honest, but she also knew that change wasn't something that happened overnight. "Then I suggest you keep trying, Chief. Because if this case has shown me anything, it's that those biases are still alive and well." Hansen nodded. "I'll do my part. But you should know, Conway isn't going down without a fight. She's filed a grievance against you, claiming you're biased against her because of her race." Carla's jaw tightened. "That's absurd." "I agree," Hansen said. "But it's out there now. The union's backing her, and they're pushing for an independent review of the case." Carla leaned back in her chair, processing the information. "Let them review it," she said finally. "I have nothing to hide." As the day went on, the courtroom was packed. The jury returned with their verdict in the case of Eric Daniels, finding Deputy Conway guilty of using excessive force. The decision was met with cheers from Eric supporters and boos from Conway's. Carla's gavel struck the bench sharply. "Order in the court." She addressed Eric. "Mr. Daniels, justice has been served today. I hope this brings you some peace." Then she turned to Conway, who sat stone-faced next to her attorney. "Deputy Conway, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers. This court will reconvene tomorrow for sentencing." Conway didn't say a word, but her eyes burned with fury as she was escorted out. Carla could feel the hatred radiating from her. And though she had won this battle, she knew the war was far from over. That evening, as Carla drove home, her mind replayed the events of the day. The verdict was a victory, but it felt hollow. The threats, the tension, the constant scrutiny, it was all taking a toll. As she pulled into her driveway, she noticed something strange. A black SUV was parked across the street, its windows tinted. Carla frowned. She didn't recognize the vehicle, and something about it felt off. She stepped out of her car cautiously, glancing at the SUV as she walked to her front door. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Whoever was in that car wasn't there by accident. Before she could reach the door, the SUV's engine roared to life, and it sped off, tires screeching. Carla's heart pounded as she watched it disappear down the street. She entered the house and locked the door behind her, her hands shaking. This wasn't just about Conway anymore. Someone was watching her. Judge Carla Whitman sat in her living room that evening, staring out the window where the SUV had been parked. The memory of its sudden departure was unsettling, but she pushed the fear aside. She had dealt with intimidation before. This was just another test of her resolve, or so she tried to convince herself. Marcus entered the room, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He placed one in front of her and sat beside her, his expression serious. "You saw it too, didn't you?" he asked. Carla nodded. "I don't think it was random." Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples. "Do you think it's connected to the case?" "Most likely," Carla replied. "But until something concrete happens, we can't jump to conclusions." "Concrete?" Marcus said, his voice rising. "A strange car sits outside our house after everything that's happened, and you're waiting for something concrete? What if the next thing they do isn't just watching? What if they act?" Carla placed a hand on his. "I know you're worried. I am too. But I can't let fear control me. That's what they want." Marcus shook his head. "You shouldn't have to live like this, Carla. No one should." Layla appeared in the doorway, looking hesitant. "Mom? Dad? Is everything okay?" Carla forced a smile. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. We're just talking." Layla lingered, her eyes filled with concern. "You're not going to let those people scare you, right?" "No," Carla said firmly. "No one gets to scare me out of doing what's right." Layla nodded, her confidence in her mother shining through. "Good. Because they don't deserve to win." The next morning, Carla returned to the courthouse under a heavier security detail. The strange SUV was gone, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. The courtroom was packed again, with reporters, activists, and Conway supporters filling every seat. The sentencing hearing was set to begin. Carla walked in, her presence commanding as always, but her mind was alert to every movement and sound around her. Deputy Conway sat at the defense table, her expression unreadable. Her attorney looked tense, flipping through pages of notes. As the proceedings began, Conway's lawyer argued for leniency, claiming her years of service to the community outweighed her actions during the traffic stop. Carla listened intently, her face impassive. When it was time for the prosecution to speak, they emphasized the harm Conway's actions had caused, not just to Eric Daniels but to public trust in law enforcement. After hours of deliberation, Carla finally addressed the court. This case has highlighted issues far beyond the actions of one individual. It is about accountability and the integrity of the justice system. Deputy Conway, your years of service cannot excuse the harm you caused. This court sentences you to 6 months in jail, with an additional year of probation. The room erupted. Eric Daniels and his supporters cheered, while Conway's camp shouted in outrage. Conway herself stood abruptly, her face red with anger. "This is a sham," she shouted, pointing at Carla. "You're a disgrace to that bench. You don't deserve to judge anyone." The bailiff moved quickly to restrain her as Carla struck her gavel sharply. "Order in the court." Conway was dragged out, her voice echoing in the hallway as the doors closed behind her. Later that evening, Carla stayed late in her chambers, going over paperwork from the day. The courthouse was mostly empty, the halls quiet except for the occasional footsteps of the cleaning crew. As she packed up her things to leave, her phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. "You've made a big mistake. You'll regret this." Carla stared at the screen, her stomach tightening. She quickly saved the number and forwarded the message to Chief Hansen with a note, "Received this tonight." Likely connected to Conway's case. Minutes later, her office phone rang. It was Hansen. "Judge Whitman, I just saw your message," he said. "I'll have my team look into it. Do you want additional security tonight?" "I already have a detail at home," Carla said. "But thank you." Hansen hesitated. "Be careful, Judge. This might be more than just angry words." "I will," Carla said, though she knew words alone couldn't ease her growing unease. When Carla arrived home, Marcus was waiting for her on the porch. He looked relieved to see her but immediately noticed her tense expression. "What happened?" he asked. Carla handed him her phone, showing him the text. Marcus's face darkened. "That's it. You're not going anywhere without extra security from now on." "I already forwarded it to Chief Hansen," Carla said, stepping inside. "He's looking into it." Marcus wasn't satisfied. "Looking into it isn't enough. Whoever sent that knows where we live. They could show up again." Carla placed her bag on the counter and turned to him. "I'll talk to the security detail tomorrow, but I'm not going to let them dictate how I live my life." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but the sound of a car engine outside made them both freeze. Carla moved cautiously to the window and peeked out. The black SUV was back. It was parked across the street again, its windows as dark as the night around it. Marcus stepped beside her, his voice low. "Call the police." "I will," Carla said, reaching for her phone. As she dialed, the SUV's headlights flashed, and it slowly began to roll forward. "Don't open the door," Marcus said firmly, moving to lock it. The SUV crept down the street, stopping briefly in front of their house. Carla could feel her heart pounding as she watched it idle there. Then, without warning, the driver's side window rolled down. A figure leaned out, holding something in their hand. Before Carla could react, a loud bang shattered the night. The front window of their house exploded inward, sending shards of glass flying. "Get down!" Marcus shouted, pulling Carla to the floor as Layla screamed from upstairs. The SUV sped off into the night, leaving chaos in its wake. Carla's hands shook as she reached for her phone again. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. It was war. Shards of glass littered the floor, sparkling like deadly confetti under the faint glow of the porch light. Carla lay on the ground, her heart racing, as Marcus shielded her with his body. Upstairs, Layla's panicked cries echoed down the staircase. "Layla!" Marcus called, his voice urgent but calm. "Stay where you are. I'm scared." Layla shouted, her voice cracking. Carla forced herself to sit up, her hands trembling as she grabbed Marcus's arm. "We need to get her. What if they come back?" Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. "I'll go. You call the police." Carla reached for her phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. As the operator picked up, Marcus dashed up the stairs. "This is Judge Carla Whitman," she said, her voice steady despite the fear threatening to consume her. "Someone just fired into my home. We need immediate assistance." The operator assured her help was on the way. Carla hung up and stood, careful to avoid the glass scattered across the floor. Marcus appeared moments later, carrying Layla, who clung to him tightly, her face buried in his chest. "We're okay," Marcus said, his voice strained. "But we need to get somewhere safe until the police arrive." Carla nodded, leading them into the downstairs bathroom. She locked the door and pulled Layla into her lap, stroking her hair as the little girl sobbed. The sound of sirens cut through the tense silence a few minutes later. Carla peeked out the bathroom window, relieved to see the flashing red and blue lights illuminating their driveway. She opened the door cautiously, signaling for Marcus and Layla to stay put. 2 officers were already at the front door, guns drawn. Carla quickly identified herself, explaining the situation. Within moments, more officers arrived, securing the area and beginning their investigation. Chief Hansen appeared shortly after, his face grim as he approached Carla. "Judge Whitman, are you and your family okay?" "We're shaken, but we're unharmed," Carla said. "They fired a shot through our window and then drove off in the same black SUV I reported earlier." Hansen nodded, glancing at the shattered window. "This isn't just a threat anymore. Whoever did this is escalating. Do you have any leads?" Carla asked, her voice sharp. "Because I can't sit here and wait for them to try again." Hansen sighed. "We're working on it. I've already had the text message you received traced, but it came from a burner phone. No identifiable leads yet." Carla's frustration boiled over. "So what am I supposed to do? Just hope they don't come back?" "No," Hansen said firmly. "We're stationing a patrol car outside your house 24/7, and I'll assign an undercover unit to keep an eye on your movements. You and your family will be protected." Carla's expression softened slightly, but the unease remained. "Thank you, Chief. But I want more than protection, I want answers." "You'll get them," Hansen promised. "But for now, let's get you somewhere safe for the night." By the time they were settled in a nearby hotel, Layla had fallen asleep between Carla and Marcus. The room was dimly lit, and the soft hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. Marcus sat up against the headboard, his eyes fixed on the window. "I should have done more," he said quietly, breaking the silence. Carla turned to him, surprised. "What are you talking about? You protected us. You got Layla to safety." "I didn't stop them," Marcus said, his voice heavy. "They shot into our home, Carla. What if they'd aimed higher? What if one of us—" "Don't," Carla interrupted, placing a hand on his arm. "Don't go there. We're safe, and that's what matters." Marcus shook his head, his frustration evident. This isn't going to stop. You know that, right? As long as you're on that bench, they're going to come after you. Carla's jaw tightened. And as long as I'm on that bench, I'm going to keep fighting. I won't let them scare me off, Marcus. That's exactly what they want. Marcus looked at her, a mix of admiration and fear in his eyes. You're stronger than I'll ever be. Carla smiled faintly, leaning her head against his shoulder. We're strong together. That's how we get through this. The next morning, Carla woke early, her mind already racing. She had a meeting scheduled with Chief Hansen and the district attorney to discuss the case, but her thoughts kept drifting to the black SUV. Whoever was behind it had gone to great lengths to send a message, and Carla was determined to figure out who they were. As she arrived at the courthouse under heavy security, she noticed a group of protesters gathered outside. Most were Conway's supporters, holding signs that read, "Justice for Conway," and "Stop the Witch Hunt." Carla ignored them, walking briskly into the building. Inside, Chief Hansen was waiting for her in the conference room, along with the district attorney, Jennifer Crane. Judge Whitman, Crane said, standing to greet her. I'm sorry about what happened last night. Are you and your family okay? We're fine, Carla said, taking a seat. But we need to figure out who's behind this before it happens again. Hansen nodded. We've increased security around the courthouse and your home. We've also flagged the black SUV and sent out an APB. If it shows up anywhere, we'll know. Crane leaned forward, her expression serious. This could be connected to Conway, but it could also be bigger than that. The backlash against your rulings has stirred up a lot of resentment in certain circles. Carla frowned. You think this is part of some larger effort to intimidate me? It's possible, Crane said. There's been chatter online, forums, social media, about people targeting judges who they feel are overstepping. You're high on that list. Carla's stomach tightened, but she didn't let it show. So what's the plan? We're monitoring those channels, Hansen said. If anything actionable comes up, we'll move on it immediately. In the meantime, we suggest you avoid public appearances and stick to secure locations. Carla shook her head. I'm not hiding. If I do that, they win. Judge, Hansen began, but Carla cut him off. No. I appreciate your concern, but my job is to serve justice, not to live in fear. If they want to intimidate me, they'll have to do better than a broken window. Hansen exchanged a glance with Crane, who nodded reluctantly. All right, Hansen said. But we'll be watching every step of the way. Carla stood, her resolve unshaken. Good. Because I'm not backing down. As she left the conference room, her phone buzzed with a new message. She glanced at the screen, her heart sinking as she read the words. You can't hide forever. We're closer than you think. Carla stared at the message, her stomach twisting into knots. The sender was once again an unknown number. She saved the text and immediately forwarded it to Chief Hansen with a note. Received this just now. Please escalate. She paused in the courthouse hallway, her breath steady but her mind racing. Her resolve was firm, but even steel cracks under relentless pressure. And this was pressure like she'd never known. Her assistant, Claire, appeared beside her, holding a stack of files. Judge Whitman? Are you okay? You look pale. Carla forced a small smile. I'm fine, Claire. Just thinking about the Daniels case. Claire frowned but didn't press further. You've got a lot of support out there, you know. People are rooting for you. Carla nodded. I hope so because this fight isn't over. Later that day, Carla returned to her chambers, her security detail ensuring her route was clear. The weight of the threats hung heavily over her as she sat at her desk. She reviewed her notes, trying to focus on the next cases on the docket, but her mind kept wandering to the chilling text. Her phone buzzed, breaking her concentration. It was Chief Hansen. Judge Whitman, Hansen began, his voice tight. We've traced the latest message to a second burner phone. Whoever this is, they're covering their tracks well. But there's something else, something you need to know. Carla's grip on the phone tightened. What is it? One of the officers stationed outside your house last night saw someone near your driveway before the SUV showed up. They were wearing a hoodie, so we don't have a clear ID, but they stayed just long enough to leave something. Carla frowned. Leave something? What? A note. It was taped to your mailbox. We have it now, but you should see it for yourself. Bring it to me, Carla said firmly. I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with. An hour later, Hansen arrived at Carla's chambers, carrying a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a folded piece of paper, the edges crumpled. Hansen handed it to her carefully, his expression grim. Carla opened the bag and read the note. "You think you're untouchable, but everyone breaks. You'll break too." Her jaw tightened. She placed the note back in the bag and set it on her desk, her hands steady despite the growing storm in her chest. "This person is escalating. What's the plan, Chief?" "We've doubled patrols around your home and the courthouse," Hansen said. "We're also looking into anyone with ties to Conway who might be behind this. We'll find them, Judge Whitman. But in the meantime, I need you to be extra cautious." Carla leaned back in her chair, her gaze sharp. "Cautious isn't enough. I need results, Chief. Whoever's doing this isn't going to stop until they think they've won." "They won't win," Hansen said firmly. "I promise you that." That evening, Carla returned to the hotel where her family was staying. Marcus and Layla greeted her cautiously, their worry evident in their eyes. Layla, normally vibrant and full of energy, seemed subdued. Carla sat beside her daughter on the bed, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Hey," Carla said softly. "How are you holding up?" Layla shrugged, her voice small. "I don't like this. I don't like being scared all the time." Carla's heart ached. She kissed Layla's temple. "I know, sweetie. But we're safe here. The police are watching over us, and I promise, we'll get through this." Layla looked up at her, her eyes wide. "You're not going to quit, are you? Even after everything?" Carla smiled faintly. "No, I'm not. Sometimes doing the right thing means standing up, even when it's hard." Layla nodded slowly, leaning into her mother's embrace. Marcus watched them from across the room, his expression a mix of pride and concern. "You've got more courage than anyone I know," he said quietly. Carla met his gaze. "We all do. We're in this together." The next morning, Carla returned to work with her head held high. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as she walked in, the tension in the air almost tangible. The sentencing hearing for another high-profile case was scheduled for that day, and the media presence outside was heavier than ever. As she presided over the proceedings, her focus never wavered. But in the back of her mind, the threats loomed like a dark shadow. Every glance from the gallery, every small noise, felt like potential danger. Yet she pressed on, determined not to let fear dictate her actions. The day passed without incident, but as Carla prepared to leave the courthouse, her phone buzzed again. Another text message. "You should have quit while you had the chance. Now it's too late." Her heart sank, but she didn't let it show. She forwarded the message to Hansen immediately, along with a note, "They're not stopping. Do something." As she stepped outside, her security detail flanked her, guiding her to the waiting car. The crowd of protesters and reporters was larger than ever, their shouts blending into a chaotic cacophony. Carla kept her head high, refusing to show any sign of intimidation. But as the car pulled away, a loud bang rang out, startling everyone. Carla's driver swerved instinctively, the car jerking sharply to the side. She ducked instinctively, her heart racing. "Gunshot," one of the security officers shouted. "Everyone down." Chaos erupted outside the courthouse as people scattered in panic. Carla's security team worked quickly, shielding her as the car sped off. Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced at the screen, her blood running cold. "Next time, I won't miss." The war had reached a new level, and Carla knew it was only a matter of time before the next strike. The car sped through the streets, leaving the chaotic scene at the courthouse behind. Carla sat in the back seat, her breath shallow and her pulse pounding in her ears. Her security detail remained on high alert, their eyes scanning every corner and intersection as the vehicle weaved through traffic. Her phone buzzed again. It was Chief Hansen calling. "Judge Whitman," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "Are you safe?" "For now," Carla replied, forcing her voice to remain calm. "But they fired a shot, Chief. This isn't just intimidation anymore. They're trying to kill me." "We've already dispatched units to the scene," Hansen said. "And I'm ordering a full lockdown around your home, the courthouse, and any other locations you frequent. This is a priority now." Carla's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the phone. "It should have been a priority from the first threat, Chief. Whoever this is, they're getting bolder. What are you doing to find them?" "We're working on tracking the source of the messages," Hansen assured her. and we're expanding our investigation to include anyone with ties to Conway. I'll update you as soon as we have something solid. Make it fast, Carla said, her voice firm. Because if they're willing to fire at me in broad daylight, they won't stop there. That evening, Carla returned to the hotel, where Marcus and Layla were waiting anxiously. As soon as she walked through the door, Marcus rushed to her side, his face pale. "What happened?" he demanded. "We saw the news. They said there was a shooting." Carla sighed, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "I'm fine. The shot didn't hit the car. Security handled it." Marcus's jaw tightened, his frustration clear. "Handled it? Carla, someone tried to kill you. How much longer are you going to put yourself, and us, through this?" Carla's eyes softened as she looked at him. "I know you're scared. I am too. But I can't let them win. If I back down, it sends a message that threats and violence work. And I won't give them that satisfaction." Layla appeared from the bedroom, her expression fearful. "Mom, are you okay?" Carla knelt down, pulling her daughter into a hug. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I promise." Layla clung to her, her small voice trembling. "I don't want them to hurt you." "They won't," Carla said firmly. "I won't let them." The next morning, Carla woke early, determined to take control of the situation. She arranged a meeting with Chief Hansen and the district attorney at a secure location, far from the courthouse or any public spaces. When she arrived, Hansen was already waiting, his face lined with worry. The district attorney, Jennifer Crane, joined them moments later, carrying a thick file of documents. "Judge Whitman," Hansen began, "I've reviewed the footage from yesterday's shooting. We didn't get a clear view of the shooter, but witnesses reported seeing someone wearing a dark hoodie fleeing the scene." "And the messages?" Carla asked. "Have you traced them?" "Not yet," Hansen admitted. "They're using burner phones, and so far, we haven't been able to pinpoint their location." Crane leaned forward, her expression serious. "Judge, this situation has gone beyond threats. We need to consider every angle: political motivations, personal vendettas, even connections to Conway's supporters." Carla frowned. "Do you think Conway herself could be behind this?" "It's possible," Crane said. "But there's no concrete evidence tying her to the threats or the shooting. She's still in custody, and her communications are being monitored." Carla leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Whoever this is, they're organized. They're not just acting on impulse, they're planning every move. Hansen nodded. "Which means they'll slip up eventually. And when they do, we'll be ready." "I don't have the luxury of waiting," Carla said sharply. "I need to know my family is safe." As Carla left the meeting, she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. She returned to the hotel under heavy security, her thoughts racing. That evening, she sat with Marcus and Layla, trying to project a sense of calm despite the storm brewing around them. But as night fell, her phone buzzed with another text message. This one sent a chill down her spine. "We see you. Tick-tock." Carla forwarded the message to Hansen immediately, her hands trembling slightly. Moments later, her phone rang. It was Hansen. "We've just traced the latest message," he said, his voice tense. "It pinged off a tower less than a mile from your location." Carla's heart skipped a beat. "They're that close." "We're moving units to your area now," Hansen said. "Stay inside and lock all doors and windows. We'll be there soon." Carla hung up, her mind racing. She turned to Marcus, her voice urgent. "They're nearby. We need to stay together." Marcus nodded, pulling Layla close as Carla secured the room. Moments later, they heard the sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway outside. Carla's pulse quickened as she peered through the peephole. A shadowy figure stood just outside the door, their face obscured by a hood. Carla stepped back, her voice low but steady. "Marcus, get Layla into the bathroom and lock the door." "What about you?" Marcus asked, his eyes wide with fear. "I'll be fine," Carla said, her voice firm. "Go. Now." Marcus hesitated but obeyed, guiding Layla into the bathroom and locking the door behind them. Carla grabbed her phone, her thumb hovering over Hansen's number. Before she could make the call, the door rattled violently. The figure was trying to force their way in. Carla's heart pounded as she braced herself, clutching a heavy lamp from the bedside table. If they broke through, she wouldn't go down without a fight. The door shook again, harder this time, the lock barely holding. Then, just as the door began to give way, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The figure froze, then bolted down the hallway. Carla exhaled shakily as the pounding of her heart echoed in her ears. The siren stopped outside, and moments later, police officers stormed the hotel, their voices cutting through the tense silence. Hansen was the first to reach her. "Judge Whitman, are you all right?" Carla nodded, her grip on the lamp tightening. They were here. Right outside the door. Hansen's jaw tightened as he signaled to his officers. "We'll sweep the building. They won't get far." But as Carla stood there, her adrenaline fading, she knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. Not yet. The hotel was a flurry of activity as officers combed through every floor, every hallway, every stairwell, searching for the intruder. Carla sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as Marcus rubbed her shoulders. Layla was curled up beside her, clutching a stuffed bear she hadn't touched in years. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. Chief Hansen returned to the room, his face grim. "Judge Whitman, we found evidence that someone tampered with the lock on your door. It looks like they were using a tool to force their way in. We also found fresh scuff marks on the fire escape leading down from your floor. They got away?" Carla asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "For now," Hansen admitted, "but we're pulling fingerprints from the lock and reviewing security footage from the hotel. We'll catch them." Carla stood, pacing the room. "I don't want to hear for now, Chief. I want results. This person, or these people, are escalating. They came to my door. My family is in danger, and you're telling me all we have are scuff marks and some blurry footage." "I understand your frustration," Hansen said, his tone calm but firm. "But we're doing everything we can. Whoever this is, they're making mistakes, and those mistakes will lead us to them." Carla stopped pacing, her hands clenched into fists. She looked at Marcus, then at Layla, who was trying to hold back tears. "Chief," she said, her voice low, "what happens if their next mistake costs me everything?" Hansen didn't have an answer. The police moved Carla and her family to a secure location that night, an undisclosed house under constant surveillance by plainclothes officers. It was safer, but it felt like a prison. The curtains were drawn tight, the windows reinforced, and every sound outside made Carla's heart jump. Marcus tried to make the best of it, setting up a makeshift movie night for Layla. But even as the family sat together on the couch, popcorn untouched in a bowl on the table, the tension in the air was suffocating. After Layla went to bed, Marcus and Carla sat together in silence. Finally, Marcus broke the quiet. "I can't keep pretending I'm okay with this." Carla looked at him, her expression weary. "I know, Marcus. But what choice do we have? I can't just quit." "Why not?" Marcus asked, his voice rising slightly. "What good is any of this if you're not alive to see it? If Layla grows up without her mom?" Carla's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that quitting would mean letting fear win, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she leaned into him, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm trying to do the right thing," she whispered. "But I don't know if I'm strong enough for this." Marcus wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly. "You're the strongest person I know. But even the strongest people need to step back sometimes." The next morning, Carla woke early, determined to regain some semblance of control. She made calls to her legal team and her assistant, Claire, arranging for court cases to be handled by other judges temporarily. Though stepping away felt like a concession, it also gave her time to focus on her family's safety. As the day wore on, Hansen called with an update. "We've identified someone from the hotel footage," he said. "A man named Kyle Jenkins. He's been arrested before for harassment and stalking, and we're looking into his connection to Conway or any groups that might be targeting you." Carla's pulse quickened. "Do you have him in custody?" "Not yet," Hansen admitted. "But we're closing in. We've put out an APB and shared his photo with all local units." Carla thanked him and hung up, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in days. But the relief was short-lived. That evening, as she was preparing dinner with Marcus, her phone buzzed with another message. This one made her blood run cold. "You think catching Jenkins will stop us? We're everywhere. Watch your back." Carla stared at the screen, her mind racing. Jenkins wasn't working alone. Whoever these people were, they were more organized than she'd realized. She forwarded the message to Hansen, her hands trembling slightly. He called within minutes. Judge Whitman, we've received similar threats from other individuals connected to these cases. It's not just Jenkins, it's a network. A network. Carla repeated, her voice tight. You're telling me there's an entire group of people targeting me? We believe so, Hansen said. It's not uncommon for certain groups to coordinate threats against public officials they see as a threat to their agenda. But we're working with the FBI now. This is officially a federal investigation. Carla gripped the counter for support. How long before they're stopped? It's hard to say, Hansen admitted. But I promise you, we're doing everything we can. Carla hung up, her mind spinning. The idea of a network, an organized group of people conspiring against her, was overwhelming. She turned to Marcus, her voice shaking. It's not just one person. It's a group. Marcus's face darkened. What does that mean for us? It means, Carla said slowly, this is far from over. That night, as Carla lay in bed, she couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every rustle of wind, felt like a threat. She got up and paced the room, her thoughts spiraling. Just as she was about to head to the kitchen for some water, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video. She hesitated before opening it, her fingers trembling. The screen lit up with a grainy recording of her house, the one she and Marcus had left. The footage showed a group of hooded figures standing outside, their faces obscured. One of them held up a sign that read, "Your time is running out." Carla's breath caught in her throat as the camera panned to the front door, where one of the figures lit a Molotov cocktail. The video cut off just as the firebomb was thrown through the window. Her phone buzzed again. A single message appeared. Tick-tock, Judge. Tick-tock. Carla's knees buckled as she sank to the floor, clutching her phone. The war wasn't just escalating, it was exploding. And the clock was ticking. Carla stared at her phone, the video replaying in her mind even after the screen went dark. Her breath came in short gasps as she tried to process the sheer audacity of the attack. The thought of her family still being in that house when it happened sent chills down her spine. Marcus rushed into the room, his face filled with concern. "Carla, what's wrong?" She held up the phone, her voice trembling. "They sent me a video of the house. They set it on fire." Marcus grabbed the phone, his jaw tightening as he watched the footage. "These people are insane. They're not just threatening you anymore. They're escalating. We need answers, and we need them now." Before Carla could respond, her phone buzzed again. It was Chief Hansen. "Judge Whitman," he said, his voice urgent, "we've just received reports of a fire at your residence. Firefighters are on the scene." "I know," Carla said, her voice steadier than she felt. "They sent me a video of it. They're taunting me, Chief. This isn't just about fear anymore. They're trying to destroy me." "We've got federal agents involved now," Hansen said. "The video you received is crucial evidence. Forward it to me immediately." "I already have," Carla said. "What's the plan? Because if you don't stop them, they're going to keep coming." "We're mobilizing resources," Hansen assured her. "The FBI has identified a potential link between this group and a domestic extremist organization. We believe the people targeting you are part of a splinter faction. Then why aren't they in custody?" Carla snapped, her frustration boiling over. "We're close," Hansen said. "But these things take time." "I don't have time," Carla said, her voice rising. "My family doesn't have time. Get this done, Chief. Now." The next morning, Carla woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. She reached for it instinctively, her heart racing. It was Claire, her assistant. "Judge Whitman," Claire said, her voice tight with urgency, "you need to see the news." Carla sat up, fumbling with the remote to turn on the TV. The local news station was broadcasting live footage of her burned home. The charred remains of the structure stood as a stark reminder of how far her attackers were willing to go. This morning, federal authorities confirmed that Judge Carla Whitman's residence was deliberately set on fire, the anchor said. No injuries were reported, as the judge and her family were relocated for safety earlier this week. Authorities are investigating potential links to extremist groups. Carla muted the TV, her hands trembling. Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking grim. "We can't live like this, Carla. Layla's terrified and he paused, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know how much more I can take." "I know," Carla said softly. "I'm trying to hold it together, but this is more than I ever imagined." Marcus sat beside her, his voice firm. "Then let me help you." Let me call some people, friends who know how to handle situations like this. Carla frowned. You mean private security? Yes, Marcus said. They're professionals, and they'll do what the police can't. They'll keep us safe. Carla hesitated, but the memory of the firebomb swayed her. Fine. Call them. But this doesn't mean I'm giving up on the investigation. Marcus nodded, relief washing over his face. I'll handle it. That afternoon, a team of private security agents arrived at the safe house. They were a mix of former military and law enforcement, their professionalism immediately evident. Their leader, a tall man named Grant, introduced himself to Carla. Judge Whitman, we're here to ensure your safety, Grant said. We've already set up surveillance equipment and reinforced the perimeter. No one gets in or out without our knowledge. Thank you, Carla said, shaking his hand. But I need you to understand something. I'm not just protecting myself. I'm still working, still presiding over cases. I won't let them scare me into hiding. Grant nodded. Understood. We'll adjust our strategy accordingly. But I need you to promise me something. If we say it's not safe, you listen. Agreed. Carla hesitated, then nodded. Agreed. That night, Carla sat at the kitchen table, reviewing court documents under the watchful eyes of her security team. The tension in the air was palpable, but she tried to focus. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions. Her phone buzzed again, and she tensed. Another unknown number. Another message. Security won't save you. We're always watching. Carla's stomach churned, but she forwarded the message to Hanson and Grant without hesitation. Moments later, Grant appeared at her side, his face grim. We intercepted movement on the perimeter cameras, he said. Someone's circling the house. We're investigating now. Carla stood, her heart racing. Do you think it's them? We're treating it as a credible threat, Grant said. Stay here. We've got this. She watched as Grant and his team moved swiftly, their efficiency a small comfort. Minutes later, one of the agents returned, holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. We found this near the gate, the agent said. No markings. No return address. Carla's throat tightened as she stared at the package. Is it safe to open? We'll handle it, Grant said, carefully examining the package. After ensuring it wasn't dangerous, he opened it to reveal a single photo. Carla's blood ran cold. The photo showed her and her family at the safe house, taken just hours earlier. They know we're here, Carla whispered. They've been watching us this whole time. Grant's face hardened. Not anymore. We're locking this place down. But Carla knew the truth. No matter how many walls or guards surrounded her, the people targeting her wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. And she wasn't about to give it to them. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the surveillance equipment. Carla stared at the photo on the table, the image of her family captured through a lens she hadn't seen, sending chills down her spine. It wasn't just a threat, it was proof of how close they had come. Grant stood across from her, his expression hard. Judge Whitman, we're escalating this. My team will conduct a full sweep of the property and secure all blind spots. We're also moving your family out first thing in the morning. Move us where? Carla asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. How do I know they won't find us again? We have a secondary safe house, one that's even more secure, Grant explained. We'll coordinate with the FBI to ensure no leaks. Carla nodded, her mind racing. Do it. But I'm not leaving this fight. Whoever these people are, they're going to realize they picked the wrong target. The night passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional updates from Grant's team. They patrolled the property, scanning every corner for signs of the intruders. Despite their vigilance, Carla found it impossible to sleep. She sat by the window, her eyes fixed on the darkness beyond, waiting for something, anything, to break the quiet. At 3 a.m., one of the agents burst into the room. Grant, we've got movement at the eastern fence. 3 figures, hooded. Carla's heart raced as Grant grabbed his earpiece. Position 2, move in. Do not engage until I give the signal. The team moved swiftly, their training evident in every step. Carla stayed behind, watching through the security feed as the cameras picked up the figures approaching the house. One of them carried what looked like a canister. Molotov, Grant muttered. They're trying to burn us out again. Not this time, Carla said, her voice cold. Stop them. Grant nodded, issuing commands into his earpiece. Within seconds, the agents surrounded the intruders, their weapons drawn. "Hands in the air," one of the agents shouted. "Drop the canister." The figures froze, then bolted toward the woods. The agents pursued, but the intruders were fast, disappearing into the shadows. One of them dropped the canister in their rush to escape. Grant's team secured it, ensuring it wasn't a trap, before returning to the house. "They got away," Grant said, frustration etched on his face. "But we've got their fingerprints now. Do you think it's enough to identify them?" Carla asked. "We'll run it through the system," Grant replied. "If they've got records, we'll know soon." By morning, Carla and her family were on the move again. The new safe house was deeper in the countryside, surrounded by dense trees and accessible only by a single winding road. The isolation felt both comforting and suffocating. Layla clung to Carla as they entered the house, her wide eyes scanning every corner. "Are we going to be safe here?" she whispered. "Yes, baby," Carla said, kneeling to meet her daughter's gaze. "We'll be safe." Marcus placed a hand on Carla's shoulder, his expression serious. "But for how long?" "As long as it takes," Carla replied. "Until they're caught." That afternoon, Hansen called with an update. "We've identified one of the individuals who dropped the canister. His name is Luke Keller, a known member of a local extremist group. He's been arrested before for harassment and property damage. Do you have him in custody?" Carla asked, her voice sharp. "Not yet," Hansen admitted. "But we've got units tracking his movements. It's only a matter of time." "A matter of time," Carla repeated, the words bitter on her tongue. "That's all I've been hearing, Chief. Meanwhile, my family is being hunted like animals." "I understand your frustration," Hansen said. "But we're closing in. Keller and his associates won't get far." "They've already gone too far," Carla snapped. "Do your job, Chief. Find them." Later that evening, as Carla sat in the kitchen of the new safe house, her phone buzzed with another message. Her stomach dropped as she read the words. "Nice new house. Too bad it won't be yours for long." Her hands shook as she forwarded the message to Grant and Hansen. Moments later, Grant entered the room, his face grim. "We've intercepted movement on the main road," he said. "It looks like a single vehicle. We're moving to intercept." Carla's heart raced as she followed Grant to the surveillance room. The cameras showed a dark sedan slowly approaching the property. Grant's team moved into position, ready to stop the vehicle. The car stopped just short of the main gate, its headlights cutting through the darkness. A single figure stepped out, holding a piece of paper. They raised their hands, signaling they were unarmed. Grant's voice crackled through the radio. "Hold fire. Let's see what they want." The figure approached the gate, placing the paper on the ground before retreating to the car. They drove off moments later, disappearing into the night. Grant retrieved the paper, bringing it back to Carla. It was a note, written in bold, block letters. "You can run, but you can't hide. We'll always find you." Carla's resolve hardened as she read the words. "This ends now," she said, her voice cold. "No more running. No more hiding. It's time to take the fight to them." Grant nodded, his expression determined. "We're with you, Judge Whitman. Let's finish this." The note marked a turning point for Carla. Sitting in the safe house's surveillance room, she looked at Grant, determination blazing in her eyes. "If they think I'm just going to sit here and wait for them to strike, they've underestimated me." Grant crossed his arms, nodding. "What do you have in mind?" "I need information," Carla said firmly. "You said the FBI identified this as part of a splinter group. I want to know everything they've uncovered, names, locations, patterns. If we're going to end this, we can't just react. We need to get ahead of them." Grant hesitated. "Judge Whitman, that's risky. If you start going after them, you put yourself in even greater danger." Carla's jaw tightened. "They've already put a target on me and my family. The only way this ends is if we take the fight to them." Grant nodded. "All right. I'll coordinate with the FBI and Hansen. Let's make sure we do this smart." The next morning, Carla was on a secure video call with FBI agent Rebecca Hartman, the lead investigator assigned to her case. Hartman was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with a reputation for dismantling extremist groups. Her crisp tone left no room for ambiguity. "Judge Whitman, we've been monitoring this group for months," Hartman explained. They're small but highly coordinated. We've identified at least 10 active members in the faction targeting you. Names? Carla asked, her pen poised. Hartman listed them off, her voice steady. Luke Keller is the ringleader. He's a former military officer with a history of violent behavior. We've tracked his associates, Thomas Brandt, Emma Lyle, and Sean Mercer, among others. Do you have their locations? Carla pressed. Hartman shook her head. Not all of them. Keller and Lyle have been spotted in the city recently, but the rest of the group is scattered. They communicate through encrypted channels, making it difficult to track them in real time. Carla frowned. And the legal system? What happens when we catch them? They'll be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, Hartman assured her. But we need to catch them first. Right now, we're building a case strong enough to dismantle the entire network. Carla leaned closer to the screen. Then use me. If they're coming after me anyway, let's draw them out. Hartman's expression hardened. That's too dangerous. We're not using you as bait. I'm not asking for permission, Carla said firmly. I'm asking for partnership. You can use their obsession with me to your advantage. Hartman hesitated, then nodded slowly. We'll discuss a plan. But you have to trust us to manage the risks. Agreed, Carla said. Let's end this. Over the next 2 days, the plan came together. Grant's team, in coordination with the FBI, devised a strategy to lure the group out. Carla would appear at a public courthouse event, one heavily advertised in the media. The goal was to draw out the group while undercover agents and private security monitored the area. Marcus was hesitant when Carla told him the plan. This is insane, Carla. You're walking right into their hands. I'm not doing this alone, Carla reassured him. Grant and the FBI will be there. This is our chance to stop them. Marcus paced the room, his frustration palpable. What if something goes wrong? What if they get to you before security can stop them? Carla placed a hand on his arm. I don't want to live like this, Marcus, always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next attack. This is the only way. Marcus sighed, pulling her into a hug. Just promise me you'll be careful. I promise, Carla said softly. This ends now. The day of the courthouse event arrived, and Carla's nerves were taut as she prepared to step into the public eye for the first time in weeks. She wore her judicial robe, a symbol of her authority and resilience, and stood tall as the press gathered outside the courthouse. Grant's voice crackled through her earpiece. We've got eyes on the crowd. No sign of Keller or his group yet, but stay alert. Carla nodded subtly, stepping up to the podium. Cameras flashed, and reporters shouted questions as she began to speak. Justice is not a privilege, it's a right, Carla said, her voice steady. No one, no matter how powerful or how determined, can undermine the rule of law. I will not be intimidated. I will not back down. The crowd erupted in applause, but Carla's eyes scanned the faces before her, looking for any sign of the group. Her security detail flanked her, their eyes sharp and their movements precise. Then, she spotted him. Luke Keller, standing at the edge of the crowd, his hood pulled low over his face. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. Keller's here, Carla murmured into her earpiece. We see him, Grant replied. Do not engage. Stay where you are. Keller began to move, weaving through the crowd toward the courthouse steps. Carla's heart raced, but she maintained her composure, continuing her speech as though nothing was wrong. As Keller reached the base of the steps, another figure appeared, Emma Lyle. She handed Keller something small and metallic. Carla's blood ran cold as she realized it was a weapon. They're armed, Carla said quietly. Stay calm, Grant instructed. We're moving in. Suddenly, Keller raised the weapon, aiming directly at Carla. The crowd screamed and scattered, but Carla stood her ground, her eyes locked on Keller's. Before he could pull the trigger, a gunshot rang out. Keller staggered, clutching his shoulder as an undercover FBI agent tackled him to the ground. Lyle tried to flee, but Grant's team intercepted her, pinning her against a wall. The scene erupted into chaos as more agents swarmed in, arresting Keller and Lyle while securing the area. Carla remained frozen for a moment, her breath caught in her throat, before Grant appeared at her side. Are you all right? He asked, his eyes scanning her for injuries. I'm fine, Carla said, her voice trembling slightly. It's over. Grant nodded. For Keller and Lyle, yes. But there are still others out there. Carla's resolve hardened. Then let's go find them. The courthouse was a scene of organized chaos. Police cars lined the street, their lights flashing red and blue as officers cordoned off the area. Reporters shouted questions, their cameras aimed at Carla as she was escorted into the building by her security detail. Despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, Carla walked with purpose, her head held high. Inside, Chief Hansen and Agent Hartman were waiting in a secure conference room. Hansen looked relieved to see her unharmed, while Hartman was already reviewing the arrest reports on Luke Keller and Emma Lyle. Keller and Lyle are in custody, Hartman began without preamble. The firearm Keller used was unregistered, but we're tracing its origins. They're refusing to talk, but we've seized their phones and other personal items. We're hoping to uncover communications with the rest of the group. Carla took a seat at the table, her hands still shaking slightly. What about the others? Keller and Lyle aren't working alone. We've identified several other members of the group, Hartman said, pointing to a board filled with photos and names. Thomas Brandt, Sean Mercer, and 3 others we haven't been able to identify yet. Our focus now is on tracking them down. Carla's eyes scanned the board, her gaze landing on Keller's photo. His face, even in a mugshot, was filled with defiance. They won't stop until they're caught, she said. Keller and Lyle were bold enough to come after me in broad daylight. The others will be just as reckless. We're prepared for that, Hartman said. But we need to know if you're willing to continue cooperating. The risk to you and your family is still high. Carla didn't hesitate. I've come this far. I'm not stopping now. Hansen gave a small nod of approval. You're one of the bravest people I've worked with, Judge Whitman. It's not bravery, Carla said, her voice firm. It's necessity. Over the next 48 hours, the arrests of Keller and Lyle led to a cascade of breakthroughs. Their phones revealed encrypted messages, meeting locations, and other names tied to the Splinter Group. FBI teams raided multiple hideouts, arresting Thomas Brandt and Sean Mercer in the process. Each arrest felt like a victory, but Carla knew the work wasn't over. The unidentified members of the group were still at large, and the threat they posed loomed over her like a storm cloud. Late one evening, as Carla sat in the safe house reviewing court documents, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Hartman. Judge Whitman, Hartman said, her tone urgent. We've tracked the remaining members to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. We're moving in tonight. Carla's heart raced. Do you need me to do anything? No, Hartman said. Just stay where you are. We've got this. Carla nodded, her grip on the phone tightening. Be careful. We will, Hartman assured her before ending the call. The operation unfolded in the early hours of the morning. Carla stayed awake, unable to sleep as she waited for news. Every hour that passed felt like an eternity. At 4 a.m., her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Hansen. We got them, Hansen said, his voice carrying a note of triumph. All 3 remaining members are in custody. The warehouse was a goldmine of evidence. Documents, weapons, even recordings of their plans to target you. Carla exhaled, the tension in her body finally beginning to ease. It's over. It's over, Hansen confirmed. You can breathe again, Judge Whitman. You and your family are safe. The news spread quickly. By the next morning, headlines across the country heralded the dismantling of the extremist group and the arrests of its members. Carla became a symbol of resilience and justice, her name synonymous with standing firm in the face of hatred. She returned to the courthouse a week later, greeted by applause from colleagues and supporters. As she walked through the familiar halls, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle had been grueling, but it had also strengthened her resolve. During a press conference that afternoon, Carla addressed the public, her voice steady and clear. Justice isn't just about laws and courtrooms, she said. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous. Hate will always try to divide us, but as long as we stand together, it will never win. The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time in weeks, Carla allowed herself to smile. That evening, Carla sat with Marcus and Layla in their new home, a house provided by the state for their safety. It was smaller than their old one, but it felt warm and safe, a place where they could start over. As they ate dinner together, Marcus raised his glass of water. To you, Carla, he said, for your strength, your courage, and for showing all of us what it means to fight for justice. Layla chimed in, raising her juice box. Yeah, to Mom. Carla laughed. the sound light and genuine. She clinked her glass against theirs, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. For the first time in what felt like forever, the war was over. And Carla Whitman had won. The months that followed were a whirlwind of reflection and rebuilding. Carla Whitman returned to the bench with a renewed sense of purpose. The dismantling of the extremist group was hailed as a major victory, not just for her but for the justice system. Yet, despite the triumph, Carla knew the scars of the experience would linger. She focused on creating positive change, using her position to advocate for reforms that addressed systemic issues. The courtroom became a space where voices long silenced could finally be heard, and Carla took pride in ensuring justice wasn't just served but also felt. One sunny afternoon, Carla sat in her chambers, reviewing a case file when Claire knocked on the door. "Judge Whitman," Claire said, poking her head in, "there's someone here to see you. He says his name is Eric Daniels." Carla's eyebrows raised. Eric Daniels, the young man whose case against Deputy Conway had sparked so much of the chaos, had stayed out of the public eye since the trial. She stood, smoothing her robe. "Send him in." Eric walked in, his posture slightly tense but his expression grateful. "Judge Whitman," he began, his voice steady. "I wanted to thank you." Carla gestured for him to sit. "You don't owe me thanks, Eric. You stood up for yourself and saw it through. That's not easy." Eric shook his head. "It's not just about my case. What you went through, it's more than anyone should have to face. You didn't have to keep fighting, but you did. You made people like me believe that the system could work for us." Carla's heart swelled with emotion. "Eric, the fight isn't over. There's still so much work to do. But I'm glad to know it made a difference for you." "It did," Eric said firmly. "And not just for me. For everyone who saw what you stood for." Carla's advocacy extended beyond the courtroom. She worked closely with Chief Hansen and Agent Hartman to develop training programs for law enforcement, focusing on de-escalation tactics and cultural sensitivity. She partnered with local community leaders to create spaces where conversations about equity and justice could flourish. One of her proudest moments came when the state legislature passed a bill inspired by her ordeal. The law increased protections for judges and public officials, while imposing harsher penalties for threats and intimidation. It was dubbed the Whitman Act, a testament to her perseverance. At home, Carla finally found the peace she had fought so hard to reclaim. Layla thrived in her new school, making friends and rediscovering her joy. Marcus returned to his work, though he remained fiercely protective of Carla, always ensuring she didn't push herself too hard. One evening, as the family sat on the porch watching the sunset, Marcus turned to her. "Do you ever think about what's next?" Carla tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "You've accomplished so much," Marcus said. "But I can't help wondering if there's more you want to do." Carla smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "There's always more. But for now, I'm right where I want to be, with you and Layla. The rest can wait." Layla piped up, her voice cheerful. "Mom, you're like a superhero. My friends say you're famous." Carla laughed, pulling her daughter close. "I'm just your mom, Layla. That's my favorite job." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Carla felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had tested her in ways she never imagined, but it had also shown her the strength of her convictions and the power of resilience. Carla Whitman wasn't just a survivor. She was a fighter, a voice for justice, and a symbol of hope for those who believed the system could be better. And as she looked out at the horizon, she knew her fight wasn't over, but she was ready for whatever came next.